Every old person has a younger version of themselves they're disappointed in, not always because of failure, sometimes because of delay, because they assumed there would be more time, more energy, more earning years, more chances to fix small financial mistakes before those mistakes became permanent patterns. And that's the dangerous thing about money problems when you're young. Most of them don't feel serious yet. The consequences are too far away to create urgency. So people drift. They overspend a little, save inconsistently, ignore investing, delay planning, and assume future income will solve everything. Then one day they wake up in their 60s or 70s, realizing the decisions that looked small at 30 quietly shaped the entire structure of their life. Some retirees regret spending too much money, but the deeper regret is usually what that spending cost them in freedom. Because every unnecessary expense in your younger years is not just money gone. It's money that never had the chance to compound, never had the chance to become security, income, or flexibility later. And the brutal truth about retirement is that time matters more than intensity. Someone who invested modestly and consistently for decades often ends up in a stronger position than someone who tried to catch up aggressively late in life. But people underestimate how fast the years move when they're financially distracted. They think they'll start investing once life becomes less chaotic, once they make more, once they pay off debt, once things settle down. But life rarely settles down permanently. There's always another reason to delay. One of the biggest regrets retirees talk about is not starting earlier. Not because they didn't know investing existed, but because they thought small amounts wouldn't matter. They underestimated compounding because compounding feels weak in the beginning. A few $100s invested each month doesn't feel life-changing at 25. But at 65, they realize those early years were the most valuable years they had. Not because they had more money then, but because they had more time. And time is the one asset you cannot recover later, no matter how disciplined you become. Another major regret is lifestyle inflation. People increase their spending every time their income rises, assuming they've earned the right to enjoy more. And to some extent, that's true. But the problem is when every raise disappears into a more expensive version of normal life. Bigger house, more car, more subscriptions, more convenience, more consumption disguised as reward. Then decades pass and they realize their income grew, but their wealth didn't. They built a lifestyle instead of building assets. And lifestyles are expensive to maintain once the paychecks stop. Many retirees also regret underestimating debt, especially high-interest debt. When you're younger, debt feels temporary, manageable, something future income will erase. But debt changes behavior over time. It limits risk-taking. It delays investing. It creates financial pressure that compounds quietly for years. And one of the hardest realizations later in life is understanding how much wealth was lost simply servicing interest instead of owning assets. People think debt steals money. What it really steals is time and momentum. Another regret that shows up repeatedly is buying too much house. Not because homeownership is bad, but because people confuse maximum approval with affordability. Banks qualify you based on what they think you can technically survive paying, not what allows you to build wealth comfortably. So people stretch. Bigger mortgage, bigger property taxes, bigger maintenance costs. Then years later they realize the house consumed the very cash flow that could have built their future. They spent decades funding a lifestyle they barely had time to enjoy because they had to keep working to support it. A lot of retirees also regret not learning basic investing earlier. Not advanced finance, not stock picking, just understanding how money compounds, how index funds work, how retirement accounts function, how inflation slowly erodes idle cash. Because financial ignorance has a cost, even when it doesn't feel urgent. And the world punishes people who leave money sitting still for too long. Many older people realize they spent years intimidated by investing when simple, consistent investing would have been enough. There's also regret around trying to impress other people. This one hits harder later because retirees can finally see how temporary social validation really was. The expensive car nobody remembers. The luxury purchases that lost value instantly. The pressure to appear successful while privately feeling financially stressed. Older people often realize they spent too much energy maintaining appearances and not enough energy building resilience. And resilience matters more with age than status ever did. Another painful regret is failing to prepare for healthcare costs. When you're young, health feels permanent. Retirement feels abstract. But aging turns medical expenses into a financial category that can reshape everything. Many retirees wish they had saved more aggressively for healthcare, specifically instead of assuming insurance or government systems would cover everything comfortably. Because health problems later in life don't just create physical stress. They create financial stress at the exact moment earning power declines. Some retirees regret helping adult children financially for too long. Not because helping family is wrong, but because many sacrificed their own retirement security trying to maintain lifestyles for others. They confused love with financial self-destruction. And later, when resources became limited, they realized nobody was coming to rescue them financially in return. That realization is brutal because it forces people to confront the difference between generosity and enabling. There's also the regret of staying in jobs they hated simply because they never built enough financial flexibility to leave. This one is less about money itself and more about what money controls. People imagine retirement regret is about luxury. Often it's about autonomy, the ability to say no, the ability to leave toxic environments, the ability to slow down without panic. And many older people realize too late that financial discipline was never really about becoming rich. It was about buying control over their time and decisions. One of the quietest regrets is not discussing money openly with a spouse or partner. Financial avoidance compounds just like interest does. Small misunderstandings become years of misalignment. One person spends while the other assumes saving is happening. One avoids debt conversations. The other avoids planning. Then retirement arrives and both people discover they built completely different expectations around the future. Financial silence can quietly damage decades of potential progress. And maybe the deepest regret of all is assuming there would always be more time to fix things later. More working years, more energy, more opportunities. But aging changes the equation. Your tolerance for stress changes. Your earning power changes. Your priorities change. And many retirees realize the future version of themselves they kept postponing responsibility for eventually became the present version dealing with the consequences. The point of hearing these regrets is not fear. Fear fades quickly. The point is clarity, because most financial disasters don't happen dramatically. They happen gradually through years of small decisions that felt harmless at the time. Small delays, small upgrades, small excuses, small forms of avoidance repeated long enough to become a life structure. And the good news is that most of these regrets are preventable. You do not need to become obsessed with money. You do not need to become extreme. You just need systems, consistency, awareness, margin. You need to stop treating financial discipline like punishment and start treating it like protection for your future self. Because one day you will become that future self, faster than you think. So tonight, instead of watching another motivational video about getting rich quickly, do something quieter and more useful. Open your bank account. Look honestly at your spending. Check your debt. Increase your investments by even a small amount. Learn one thing you've been avoiding financially. Because retirement regret rarely comes from one catastrophic mistake. It usually comes from years of avoidable neglect. And if this video gave you a different way to think about money, subscribe and stay close to this channel. Because the goal here is not fake luxury, internet flexing, or financial fantasy. The goal is building a life where your future self looks back with relief instead of regret.